welcome to the session on effective feedback and assessment using digital tools. My focus is very much going to be on these two things. And of course, I will be sharing this in context with Showbie and Socratic. We do have a bunch of other tools that are now being integrated into Showbie as well. And I'll make reference to them as and when it's appropriate. A little bit about myself. So my background is very much as a teacher. I was a high school teacher for many, many years. And I'm based in the UK in a place called Bolton, where it rains a lot, just outside Manchester. And I've been working then as a high school principal for a short while, and also then a CEO of a small multi-academy trust, which for those of you that are not in the UK are just a collection of schools. I've also founded a free school as well, put that bid in a few years ago, which is actually doing quite well now as well. So I've been involved with that. And of course, for the last 3-4 years or so, before I took on this role as VP of Learning, I've been working with leadership teams and schools in many different parts of the world. And mostly that's been about the effective use of technology for learning, with the focus being on learning and making sure that the technology is applicable, because I do feel that there's a lot of things that we can do that with technology now that simply were just not possible in the past. So rather than me just kind of talking through slides, I am going to kind of switch over and show you a few things as well. There's a couple of things I do kind of want to reference. So for example, the sources that I'll be kind of referencing, and then a lot of the research element that I'm going to be talking about are from these three organizations. Ofsted is a organization in the UK. For those of you that are joining from abroad, they kind of look at standards and so on. And then there's the Education Endowment Fund, which does a lot of research-based assessment on a variety of different things, but all education related. And you can go to their website and pull off lots of articles and lots of different things. And that's can be quite useful. And finally, there's also some information from the National Foundation of Education Research. So, of course, I will mention and talk a little bit about remote learning and so on as well, because that's the kind of order of the day, if you want. And that's what a lot of educators are kind of dealing with. But if you've got questions that's to do with Showbie, Socratic, mobile learning, and it's got nothing to do with this presentation, absolutely feel free to put that in the Q&A. I'll look at the questions that are there at the end, and I'll be more than happy to kind of share that. I'll also share my email at the end of the session. So if there's anything specific you want to ask about, you'll be more than welcome to kind of contact me as well. So let's get started with this. SchoolKit is a new concept that's kind of out with Showbie at the moment. If I just come out of here, I'm presenting off my iPad, but actually you can access these tools through a browser, laptop, PC, and so on as well. And if I just tap on this, this is SchoolKit. It contains Showbie. It contains an assessment tool called Socratic. So remote assessment it does, as well as assessment in the classroom. We're going to be looking at that in some detail. There's also an augmented reality library called Hologo that allows you to kind of look at models and manipulate them and so on, which can be very useful. And also there's another tool called Explain Everything, which some of you might be familiar with. It's a whiteboarding tool, but it really is a very, very powerful tool, to the point where some teachers are using this to write on and kind of do presentations with and make annotations with and so on. We'll have a little bit of a look into that as well, because it really does connect with feedback quite well. There are two other tools, Educreations and Codable. Educreations is also a whiteboarding tool, but it's very simplistic. And there's also Codable, which is a coding curriculum. And that's something that we're not going to look at this session. So that's SchoolKit. And if you're using Showbie and Socratic already, and you don't know whether you have SchoolKit or not, it might be worthwhile inquiring whether you have this, because if you have SchoolKit, it's there for all students and all teachers as well. Okay, so let's just go back to the kind of presentation. I'm going to start off with feedback, because it's probably one of the most powerful things that happen in education. It happens very regularly. We're always learning new things. Research is always telling us more. And it's and kind of the Hattie's work in the 2000s kind of told us a lot about, you know, the impact of feedback and so on. And there's lots and lots of things that have been written on there. The quality of feedback is important. Feedback is not just from teachers to students. Feedback is also considered when students respond to the teacher's feedback, yeah? And that's also quite key as well. And for me, that's kind of been a measure in some ways. Some of the impact studies that I've done in schools, British schools, in Dubai, in the UK, and so on, and working with those leadership teams to develop new policies around feedback that incorporate the digital aspect of learning has actually been quite key. So let me kind of show you some of these kind of approaches that can work in Showbie. And some of you might be familiar with this. If I just go into Showbie and I kind of open this up, what you'll notice, for me, I've got a whole bunch of schools that I've been doing lots of different things with. So they're all kind of listed here on the left-hand side. You will probably have classes. If you're not familiar with Showbie, don't worry about what does this mean and how do you set it up. That's a different webinar. You can come to a webinar and sign up for something called Understanding Showbie, and I kind of go through that in detail. But let's just have a look at this. If I go into a class and then into a specific assignment, when I'm in that assignment, I get to see all my students listed there, and right at the top, I get something called shared items. Now, shared items is kind of the place where teachers, when they're interacting with a whole class, will kind of spend their time. So if we go into shared items, and here, if I kind of look, there's a whole variety of things that I've shared. Now, the way shared items work is anything that I put here, it's shared with all the students. So, and there's a variety of ways in which I can do that. Simplest way is I can type something in. And if I type something, there you go, it types. If you're using an iPad, a tablet, then you can actually scribble on it as well. So, you know, if I was to scribble and kind of do something like this, it'll just tap in and it will just turn it into text, which can be quite useful. However, from a feedback perspective, where I feel that Showbie kind of comes into its own. So this is where you often find schools that are using Google as their infrastructure. They might even have Google Classroom and so on, but they're still using Showbie because the two things do integrate to actually amplify this whole teacher-student feedback connection and the home connection as well. So what this does quite well, if I tap on the plus icon on the top right-hand side, there's an option for voice note, yeah? So if I tap on voice note, this thing turns into an audio thing. And now, if I hit the record button, that will record my voice and share it with everyone. So if I did something like this, hey everyone, welcome to the class. And today we're gonna be looking at Romeo and Juliet. And I hit the post button and I've actually just spoken to the whole class. And you can see how quickly that uploads. If I wanted to keep my finger pressed and rename this as well, I can, kind of quite easy to do. And actually, from a feedback perspective, the ability to speak to a student is absolutely golden, as we know. And actually, when we're in the class, that kind of ability for the teacher to give feedback there and then, or course correct and so on, is actually quite powerful. And that's what we're used to doing. But because of time constraints, because of the physical impossibility of, you know, being able to give verbal feedback in detail to every student within a school timetable, we then have kind of evolved systems like red pen, green pen. There are schools that were putting in additional pro formas and sheets of paper in books where the teachers would give feedback in that. And then the expectation is for students to respond back, which are all great systems. But what I feel now is actually technology has got us to a point where there's a degree of simplicity and reliability in which students, where we can respond with voice when the students are not with us. So that's technology allowing us to do things that we couldn't do before. I can speak to my students, my whole class, and it's 7 o'clock in the evening. Probably not, teachers should be taking a break, but I can do it at my leisure and I can speak to them. Of course, when when it's not lockdown and when we are in school, I will speak to my students verbally as well, face to face. But the fact that within 3 seconds, 4 seconds, the amount of verbal feedback I can give would typically equal 5, 6, 7 lines of writing, which I'm not going to have time to do, means that quite often, I'm not saying always the case, quite often the opportunity to give high quality feedback is there. And you're connecting at an emotional level. You know, the way you speak with those students, with each student is going to be different, even if you're saying the same thing. It's one of the things that we found in the impact studies with one of our schools, where teachers were giving feedback. But one of the teachers said that when I was giving feedback to 2 students, if I was giving it in the book, pen to paper, I would have written exactly the same thing. But because I'm giving it verbally, I'm actually saying the same thing, but I'm saying it in different ways. And I'm kind of unconsciously doing that. So there's some real power behind that. Obviously, this is all accessible by parents if you want it to. And that's something that we kind of see as well. When lockdown happened, a lot of these schools that had these digitized verbal feedback systems kind of created and policies created, actually they were able to shift into this kind of mode very, very easily. So I'm just going to pull up a document. Oh, actually, here it is. So this is an example. I've turned it into a generic feedback policy, but actually it's a school that I was working with in a leadership team, a British school in the UAE, believe it or not. And here you can see that's where I've taken that statement from around Hattie and so on. But for their school, they've actually still got handwriting in here as well. Now, that's really important because quite often schools feel that if we're using technology or iPads, or we have a one-to-one program or laptop, that means that students might not be writing. Actually, I would argue with the right kind of tools that you could probably get students to write more, because the turnaround time for feedback can be significantly quicker for teachers. I'm going to show you some quick tools that kind of save those, bring those efficiencies for teachers as well. So handwriting is still important. Showbie supports that. For me, that's quite key. You know, when life does return to normal, and if you're in a country where final exams are pen to paper, then the ability to train students to be able to write for longer periods of time and effectively and all that kind of stuff is actually would still be important. And that means that you might want them to continue writing and doing activities at home as well. I'm going to talk about the handwriting stuff in a moment. Just because it's verbal feedback doesn't mean it's going to be good feedback. That's really important to understand. Okay, understanding good quality feedback is a thing. Okay, and to understand that feedback is at its best when it's the student giving you feedback based on what the comments that you've made to them. That's actually quite key, and that's something that should be looked at. And this was really interesting because what we found in this particular school is that the number of students responding back using Showbie and verbal feedback and so on was actually higher than the kind of traditional approach in the way in which they were writing in books and expecting them to write and kind of respond to the feedback in their books. Most students were responding this way. Why? Could be a variety of different ways. Number one, it's just quicker. Number two, it's easier. I can speak. If you've got children who don't speak English as their first language, if English is your medium or whatever your medium is and that's not their first language, it's actually easier for them to speak it rather than write it. Students that have additional learning difficulties, for them to connect and speak and listen becomes more powerful. Students with dyslexia, dyspraxia, and so on can actually engage with this, and you can really kind of pick up on the knowledge and content. So there's a number of things that actually came out of this that was significantly powerful. We started to look at the feedback stuff. Okay, just moving on. In this particular school, one of the things that they did was, and I'm not saying this is right or wrong or whatever, but you have to build consistency in your own organization. But they started to use emojis, and this was quite powerful because they wanted a consistent approach to feedback across their organization that went from a primary school to a secondary school to doing A levels and so on as well. So this was something that they came up with, and it also kind of gets the organization to ensure that we're giving good quality feedback. So yes, there's a general feedback. what went well, quality of work, hey, this was good, very neat, so on. There's some general feedback, but then the footprints represents next steps, which is a really important part of feedback. What do you need to do to get to the next bit? Some schools in the UK here, we call it even better ifs and so on. How do I make it better? So there's that kind of stuff. So even the feedback that the teachers are giving is kind of scaffolded and broken down. Then there's obviously error corrections, which you can have and so on. And in this particular case, the students are also able to respond back with voice as well. So that becomes really quite important. And that dialogue and learning dialogue can continue. If I just kind of go back into Showbie here, what becomes kind of apparent. So let me just show you this, right? So if I tap on, and this particular option that I'm going to show you now, in terms of workflow to give feedback, is there on the iPad. However, students that are not using iPad, they are using devices with cameras, mobile phones, and so on, and then sharing the images onto their laptops and being able to upload it that way. So it's just an extra couple of steps, but not something impossible for students to do. On an iPad, it's built in, and Showbie actually makes use of that feature. So if I tap on the plus icon here, and if I bring your attention to the third option down that says scan document, this in effect becomes your photocopier. Okay, so the amount of printing and stuff that happens in a school, there's a school here in Yorkshire in the UK that we worked with, again with an impact study, just with 2 teachers in their classrooms, and actually there was some significant savings that they actually made over time in terms of their ability to kind of save teachers from going to the photocopier, printing out, and then uploading. So this is how it works. Let me just show you this because it's super simple, very easy to do. If I tap on scan document, it comes up. It looks like the camera, my daughter's English book. And if I've actually not pressed a button at all, and you can see that the blue thing is picking up the edges of the paper. Now, if I wanted to manually do this, I can. It's just done it by itself there. But if I turn over the page and grab the next page, maybe I'll skip another page and do that one because that's got sticking. But if I just manually do this, I can move the edges and do things like this. And then if I just do keep scan, it will keep that, saving at the bottom. I can do as many as I want. This could have been worksheets, this could have been exam papers, and so on. If I hit the save button on the bottom right, this will now ask me this quite a useful question, which is, do I want to upload these as individual items, or do I want to combine it as a document? If I do add as document, what this will do very nicely is that it will, in the background, without you asking you lots of other questions, where do you want to save it and all that kind of stuff, it just glues it together and then uploads it as a single document. Now, what this then means, and you can see that there, and because it was in shared items, it's there for everyone. Now, I could use this for differentiation. So if I want to give feedback and kind of respond to certain students, right at the top, you might have missed this here, right at the top where it says everyone here. If we click on this, you can actually select none and just select the students that you want. And when you save this, and now if I was to do anything here, it will only go to Glenn, Debbie, and Andrea. Okay, but let's just do select all and save. So that can be quite useful. If I tap on the images here, for me, this becomes quite interesting because here now, I've got a bunch of tools at the top that allow me to give feedback in a way that I wasn't able to do, that I would be able to do pen to paper. So yes, very important for students to write, especially in the UK. Quite a few other countries still doing final exams pen to paper. Okay, so that's still important that they're writing. However, everything beyond that, the teacher's feedback, assessment, how they give feedback and all of that, that's actually open for technology to kind of bring in efficiencies and bringing additional tools that allow you to kind of, build that impact. So there's some very simple tools here. I can write and scribble on this. I've got highlighter pens that I can highlight things with as well. You could do this on a browser as well. The Chrome browser is probably the best one to use. But if I just tap on the text box here and I tap here, This is great because I can also, use my keyboard to type things if I want to, and give feedback in this way. And it might, if you're on a laptop, that kind of makes sense. It's very easy. I can also kind of scribble on here as well. So I can say, if I was to just write, it will kind of turn, didn't do that too well, but it will kind of turn it into text. And that can be quite useful as well. So let me do that again and show you. That's kind of useful, and I can save that. And oops, let me just save that. And if I just minimize that so the text doesn't get obscured, I can put that wherever I want. Now the students cannot move that. Once I put that somewhere, they can't delete it, they can't move it, but they can open it and read it and so on. And of course, this is the point at which the school that I made reference to will also add emojis and so on as well. What's also powerful here is this next button here. It's lit up in blue at the top. And if I tap, let's just say I tap on number 6, on the left hand side here, this now then turns into a voice note, and now I can annotate this document with voice. And if I hit the record button, I can do, hey, this is really good, but there's some spelling, punctuation and grammar errors. Please can you highlight them in green and correct them? Thank you. Save, and actually that's gonna go there. And if I just press and rename, here is now where I can add emojis, and this is what they were doing. So it could be, hey, footsteps, and maybe you're using hearts and saying, hey, this is really good, and that's what it means. Otherwise, it might not be. It might be that you're just tapping on there as well. And of course, if you're joining us and you use a different language other than English, of course, you can use all the keyboard settings and features to write in different languages as well. Then there's a whole host of language that are kind of supported in Showbie as well. So this is kind of quite powerful from a feedback perspective. Okay, one other aspect before I kind of make a start on assessment is there are some really nice kind of options that can save teachers significant amounts of time. So if students have annotated this and come back, or uploaded their work and come back, rather than me having to go out and click on the next student, it just brings up the list. And then if I tap on Alex, for example, Alex's work will be uploaded, and I'll be able to see that, and then I can annotate that and give feedback and so on. So this then becomes a very fast, quick marking feedback tool. Okay, couple of other things as well. There is the option to do screen recording. Yeah. Now, if you're using a laptop or a browser, that can be quite powerful for kind of giving feedback as well, where they went wrong, how they can make improvements and so on. And there's nothing better than the teacher, sitting next to you, drawing on a piece of paper, and just, you can see the corrections and you can listen to them explaining it at the same time. That's brilliant. That's kind of like the goal value, where you've got your teacher giving you that one-to-one attention and giving you feedback and so on. And to a certain extent, that's kind of possible with this because, and it's possible with technology, not just necessarily with Showbie. So there are tools like loom.com. If you don't know about it, you should look into it. The free version is usually sufficient for teachers, LOOM.com. Yeah, definitely worthwhile looking at that. So if you're using a laptop and so on, there's those kinds of tools that allow you to screen record and then write things and do things and record your voice, and it turns the whole thing into a video. There's an option here on an iPad to record screen, which is right there. And if I tap on one that I've done, I can't do this right now because I'm on Zoom and it interferes with Zoom. But if I tap on screen recording, you'll kind of see that it comes up like this. There's a little video of me on there. It kind of, it's got a front-facing camera. I can move it about to different corners and so on. I can flip the camera as well. I can do annotations and so on, and kind of, and do that very easily. However, part of SchoolKit in terms of feedback and explanation, or even, I suppose, the idea of, chunking. That means taking a concept that is quite complicated and breaking it down into smaller, understandable blocks, and then sharing that with students so they understand all the smaller blocks, and then you bring it together. So that kind of approach to learning is something that's quite useful. a lot of research that shows a good way of doing things. It helps things to move from short-term memory into long-term memory as well. But if I just come out of here, and you're not aware of it, there is a tool called Explain Everything that allows you to do that really well. So if I was to go into Explain Everything, sorry, that's some slides of me. Sorry, I'm kind of just drawing here. Just get rid of all of this. And bottom right hand corner, you'll see that I've actually got 3 slides on here, and they're all just me, kind of emojis and all that. This was actually a PowerPoint, and I've been able to export it directly into here. Okay. Now, the thing about Explain Everything is, and the reason why it's kind of quite useful and part of the ClassKit tool, is that actually, as I'm right at the bottom here, you can see that there's a record button here, right? And that record button will allow you to kind of record your screen and your voice. Yeah, if you don't want your voice on, you can switch off the microphone and so on, but it allows you to record your voice. It records all your annotations and so on. And then what it does is, if you tap on the export button, it will turn your whole PowerPoint with all the slides. So you would present just like you're presenting, you would present in a class. The nice thing about this is that you can plug it into your projector when things go back to normal and you're in your classroom and you're still writing on your screen, but it's all happening on the big screen and students can see it. But the powerful element that Explain Everything provides is the whole thing is recorded. So students asking questions and you explaining and answering those, that's recorded. The annotations that you make and anything that you change, that's recorded. Okay, and then you hit the arrow, hit export video, and then from here you can actually just go straight into Showbie, and it doesn't ask you a lot of questions. And I keep bringing that up because keeping something simple is really a really important part of a successful piece of technology. Okay, quite often we introduce expensive technological tools into the organization, and they're kind of like gym membership. We paid a lot of money for it, but no one's using it. And quite often that happens because the degree of simplicity and reliability that should be there with the tool, it's just not there. So therefore teachers, use it for a short while, and then quite often we don't use it, and because it's not always reliable, you don't know when it's going to work and so on. So this is kind of quite key. So from here I can choose specific classes. I can go right down to a specific student, and the reason why I'm mentioning this on the feedback is because you can give very detailed feedback if you want to a specific student. I mean, I've just uploaded a keynote here. This could have been a Word document. I can upload, if I just was to tap on a new slide, and if I was to tap on this icon here, I've got pictures that I can upload just by tapping the camera. I can record a video and upload that. I can even upload a browser. I find this bit quite fascinating, yeah? So if I was to go to the Showbie website, that's an actual browser in here, and it's recording, right? And I'm scrolling through the browser, and actually, if I wanted to write on this, let me choose a different color. If I want to highlight this, point to this, and so on. And I'm on an actual website, and if I go back to the hand icon and I move it up, what you find is that actually my annotations stick with the areas that I've drawn, and I can carry on going into this. So I find this quite powerful in terms of the fact that it will record all of this, and I can use it as an explanation for students as well. There is one other thing that's really powerful as well. So if I was to just tap on a new screen here, what you'll notice at the top, there's an option to invite. Now for me, this is very unique. Yeah. So part of ClassKit, if you get Explain Everything, you get this feature. So I could actually invite you, right, to join my Explain Everything session here. Now I could share this out in discussions, so the whole class is invited and they can just watch, or I might just do it as a one-to-one, right? And all I would have to do is just click on share and just mail it out to you, or even go to Showbie and put it in discussions and so on. The moment you click on that, what would happen, and I'm not going to do it now because we won't have time, what would happen is you would be able to write on here alongside me. We could play a game of noughts and crosses and you could all join in. Okay. So you can imagine doing a past paper question. Imagine, this, especially in the current climate, students are at home, you're here, you want to do something live in this way. Actually, the students can, and you can say, okay, I want this student to be able to write on, they can do that as well. Or actually, Jonathan, can you fill this in and do question 2, and everyone's watching and they can write and they can do that as well. And the audio goes through as well. So as you're speaking, they can hear you. And of course, if you want to, you can hear them as well. You can even then begin to kind of change this and really go into a different mode where it's called presentation mode. So when you switch that on, and you can switch that on halfway through if you want to, that means that only you presenting and the students cannot scribble or write or do anything as well. So this is quite a powerful workhorse in terms of whiteboarding. Probably one of the best tools I've seen. It doesn't matter if you upload Word documents, PowerPoints, Keynote pages, numbers, videos. If you want to put up equations in there, browsers, it takes pretty much everything, yeah? And it does really nice things, like if you were to go into a presentation and then share it into explain everything, it will split it up into different slides for you automatically and present it to you one slide at a time, so you can very easily just hit the record button and begin speaking and talking and so on as well. So that's actually quite powerful and can really lend itself to assessment from that perspective. If I just go back to our presentation, one of the other aspects of this, and this is where some of these tools that I've spoken into really feed into, we've talked about feedback, that retrieval practice, making sure, have the students learned this particular topic, this idea, this concept, and being able to check on that regularly is quite key. Now, regularly might mean that you might do a quick question 20 minutes or something, or before you move on to the next part. The days of just saying to students, have you got this? And a few heads nod. Or do you understand? And a few heads nod. And then you move on, really should be gone. Because we now have tools that within an instant, within a few seconds, can capture responses from all 30 students at the same time, analyze the data and present it to you in a way that actually you can see, okay, half the class have got this, half the class haven't, and so on. So Socratic is the tool that does that. Now, I'm not going to go into massive detail right now. Again, if you want to know more about that, come to the Understanding Socratic workshop, and I kind of go through it in some detail. But it's right there. It's part of ClassKit. And what Socratic does is it allows you to have a variety of different kind of quizzes. You can access it through a browser. So if I go like this and log in and go teacher login, brilliant, I'm in, and I've got quizzes that I can launch. Space Race is a gamified version of the same quiz, so you can launch it in a gamified way. It's not like, some fantastic graphical game or anything, but you can kind of get a sense of competition and create teams and so on. One of the things that I really like is this quick question part. So working with a school the other day, and actually as part of their teaching and learning plan, they now put learning checks in place throughout the lesson. So suddenly a slide will pop up, and on the slide, there will be some questions. It might be multiple choice, it might be true or false, it might be a short answer. And what's nice about this is that the teachers can actually literally one tap, multiple choice, and you would go in there and literally, this is my polling, and the students would be able to join either with a QR code and a link, and one tap, and they can be directly here, and they're answering that question they're seeing on the screen. So they don't need the question here for quick question, because they're actually seeing the question on the screen in the form of a slide, or they may be that the teacher's asking the question verbally. Is it which ones are solid, A, B, C, D, or E? And it's a live lesson, and the students can see certain objects in front of them, and they would just choose, and you would get a real-time response here. And that is actually quite useful, because it's telling you that actually, yes, majority of the students have understood it. It's time to move on, get on to the next part, and so on. So that can be quite a powerful thing. One other thing from an assessment perspective is quite useful is Socrative works well for remote assessment. Okay, so I could launch a quiz. Let's just say if I was going to do this world facts quiz, and you can make quizzes here as well. It's not like they already have to be pre-prepared. You can kind of make your own quizzes with a combination of true, false, short answer questions, and also open-ended questions as well. And if I hit next, what Socrative then does that's actually quite powerful is it allows me to give that assessment in 3 different ways. Either I can have it teacher-paced, which is basically, as a teacher, I get to choose which questions are coming up in which order and how long they get on that particular question. Now, from a remote perspective, what's really important is that it's that you can control that time between questions, because they don't have enough time to then go and Google stuff and look things up. And it may be that you use this at the beginning of the lesson or beginning of a new episode of learning that just measures how much do students already know. So it could be just a quick thing for you there. There's open navigation. That's like, here's a quiz or an assessment. It's going to be open for 2 weeks, and students can go away, self-study, learn about stuff, and go in and have a go at answering the questions. And actually, if they get things wrong, they can correct it and all that kind of stuff until you hit the finish button. And then the same quiz, the third option that Socrative gives you is that you can do this as instant feedback. And that just basically means that here's question 1, and the students have to respond, and then the next question loads up, and then the next, and the next, and so on. You do get options on the side, so you can shuffle questions. So, you know, you don't get the same question popping up for all the students, right? They'll get all the questions, but they get them all in different order, so they can't message one another and kind of say, hey, what did you get right and wrong, and so on. Now, if I just come out of this, if I go into rooms, let's go into this. Actually, let's go into reports and have a look at some quizzes that were done not so long ago. And if I go here, what you'll see is I would see a real-time version of this happening when the quiz is running. So I would be able to see which students, I've blanked the names out, but they're there, they're not students, by the way, those names. So please don't worry. But those people that have done the quiz, or students that have done the quiz, you know, who's got what right and wrong. If I don't want to see the results, but I just want to make sure that they've got responses, I can see who hasn't completed it. I could see it by progress. I could see the score and so on. What's also nice is right at the bottom is giving me the percentage pass rate. So, for example, I can see question 2 is only getting 50% pass rate. Maybe there's some misconceptions there that I need to address. What Socrative also do is that it will export the data. Yeah. So you can get a download of the complete an Excel results sheet. So if I just pop into, oh, no, not that one. I did one earlier. Here it is. Right. So this is an Excel spreadsheet that it will download and make for your particular class. And then you can kind of go in and edit and see the results and the data that's there. Okay, this is taking a lot longer than it would normally because it's pretty much instantaneous mostly. So if I was to hit download again, there we go. So I'll just download it again and hit download, and it will download. Obviously, it will go onto my computer and your on your laptop thing, but actually here it does open up Excel on an iPad as well. So I can see the student names. I can see the school. I can see what teams they were because they did the gamified one. This is an interesting one because it's kind of telling me the average number of correct answers. So that could be a constant that I'm looking across the quizzes that they do. Does their average increase as we go along? And of course, you get this in this format as well. The other thing that's also useful is these individual student PDFs, but you actually get that in Showbie. So it's integrated into Showbie. You could launch this in Showbie, and the individual reports are distributed automatically to each student. And then you can use all the annotation and feedback tools that we looked at as well. So you can see how that integration works so well. You also get this kind of results summary, which I think from a teacher's perspective is really quite powerful. So it's kind of giving me this question level analysis, how many students, it's not just how many students got it right and wrong, but where's the distribution of correct and incorrect answers? So, you know, here, half the class, I would probably say, doesn't really know the answer to question 1. It seems to be like they're just guessing. Whereas question 2, again, half the class get it, half the class probably don't. Maybe I need to address that as well. Whereas for question 3, actually most people in the class understood this, and so on. So it's giving you some feedback to course correct your planning for your next lesson. So that's Socratic. I think between Socratic, Showbie, and Explain Everything, you have some significantly powerful tools that really allow you to kind of, you know, get the best out of this whole kind of process: feedback, retrieval practice, and assessment. And I think at this moment in time, if you're in a country where remote learning is in place, these 3 things are actually quite key, because the cognitive science behind this doesn't change, behind learning doesn't change, even if we are in remote learning kind of scenarios. So we've got to kind of focus on that. Okay, so just kind of moving along very quickly, conscious of time. Keep it simple. I've talked about simplicity and reliability. Make sure that the tools that you're using, it's consistent across your organization, and simplicity is quite key. The problem with teachers not adopting technology, and that fear sometimes people talk about in schools around taking on technology, is because, not because teachers can't use it, because they do, they use technology all the time in the real world, but it's probably because the typical experience that teachers have had is the type of technology they've been exposed to has not been simple and reliable. So keeping it simple is very, very important. And finally, engagement. There's some awesome tools that ClassKit provides around engagement. I have my views on engagement. There's some really interesting things. So in this scenario, this is Hologo, by the way, now. It's part of ClassKit. I can put an elephant in the room, pardon the pun, and, you know, I can kind of make it attack. I can record my voice, turn this into a video. It does give me the option to do that. I can hit the record button and begin to speak and just talk over it. Maybe I'm setting an assignment that talks about, you know, habitats and how, you know, this animal is suited for its habitat, what kind of, you know, features does it have that allows it to kind of do that, and so on. So there's all those kinds of things that I can do, and whether it's young children, you know, we can kind of do a variety of different things in terms of the way in which we set activities. Alternatively, with Showbie, you can now ask students to do things like go into Hologo, you know, download the elephant, put it in your room, and record your voice and explain, you know, the features, why it has big ears or big tusks and a nose the way it does, and trunk and so on, and how does it adapt to its environment. And you want, you know, a 30-second or 1 minute kind of recording on how does that, and you're kind of measuring that for authenticity, presentation, their confidence, their ability to know about the subject. There's a variety of things that you can do, and it's doable. Yeah, it's not just that, but I think Hologo is quite unique in some ways because it's divided into subjects. There aren't many AR libraries that allow you to do that. And if you're not using an iPad and you're just using a laptop, you can actually use these as 3D objects as well. So if I was to go in biology, tap an animal cell, rather than having an AR version, I can just go into the object version and I can still manipulate and see this and zoom in and begin to talk about, you know, the different organelles within the cell and so on. So that's absolutely possible with this. And finally, there is this pretty nice thing called Journeys as well. That's quite fun to play with. I'm not going to go into this because I'm going to leave time for questions. But this will literally open a portal in my room, a doorway, and then I can actually walk through onto the Great Wall of China. And if I go into the AR versions, and there's my room, and let me just put the door down here. There, the door's open, and actually that is the Great Wall of China. I'm kind of moving with this and showing you, but I'm not going to go through. And there's a variety of different kind of tools like that that can have, you know, a big impact on engagement. The one thing I will say with engagement, yes, it's important. However, engagement does not mean progress. Okay, it doesn't mean that just because students are engaged, good learning is happening. Okay, the key thing is that yes, we need engagement, that does help, but we need to make sure that the tools are not necessarily distracting us from teaching the curriculum, and the focus is there. And I think that's the scaffold that Showbie provides. It keeps things in check. Yes, you can have a lot of fun with tools like Hologo, but actually it's meaningful, it's impactful, and it's actually adding to the learning journey of students. Okay, I'm going to stop there, and we're going to go for questions. If there are questions, I'm more than happy to kind of take those. Let me just kind of stop sharing my screen and go back into Zoom. Okay, let's have a look. Yes, Edna, you can if you I think Sarah will be able to kind of share that with everyone. So that will be something that you will have, and feel free to share it with colleagues as well. I'll be more than happy with that as well. I will share with you my email contact details as well, in case you're already Showbie users and you have questions, and or you're quite new and you've got a school-wide thing, then absolutely I can work with your school to kind of share the possibilities with Showbiz. So that's my details there. Absolutely feel free to kind of get in touch. I'd be more than happy to kind of go through things with you as well. Okay. There are other questions. Please feel free to throw them up. Sarah, are we okay with questions?
Yeah, we seem to be. Yeah, if there are any questions after the session. Oh, one's just popped up, Abdul.
Okay.
So I will just read this out to you if that's okay. So yeah. I have a different room for each class. I want to leave a quiz open for others to complete and upload it in another assignment, but it asked me to close. So basically, is there a way around having multiple quizzes happening in Socratic within one room?
Yeah. So I understand. I think, Mandy, I'm getting the question that you're asking. Yes, you have a room per class, but you've got Socratic Pro. There's no reason why you can't have 2 rooms per class. Okay. The rule with Socratic is you can have 1 quiz running in 1 room, right? So if I've got a class and I want them to do 3 quizzes, all I need to do is invite them to 3 different rooms, which they can go at any time. And you would then have the 3 different quizzes that you want kind of activated or launched in those 3 rooms. And the students would then complete that. Okay. So don't feel that you have to restrict a class to a room. 1 class can have access to many rooms, and you can very easily control that by which quizzes are being launched. So you can do that. There are good examples of differentiation happening that way. So you've got assessments that are kind of in order of increasing difficulty, and you've then using Showbie. And one thing you can do in Socrative is, if you go to the rooms, then there's a share icon, and you can, if you click on that, it will give you the URL, the address that the students can tap on straight from Showbie, and it will take them directly into that room without them having to kind of, sign in, put their names in, and all that kind of stuff, right? So that's absolutely possible. So what you can do is then you just share the links to those 3 rooms with the students that you are differentiating. So you would invite the students, that are potentially a greater depth, or students that are kind of need a more challenge. You can invite them specifically through that sharing feature that allows you to differentiate, and just share the link with those students, and so on. So just remember that it's 1 class can have many rooms, and that should solve the problem. Okay. How do you assign to Socrative? Sorry, Pernil, I'm trying to understand that. If you're assigned to Socrative, you mean the students? Is that what you mean? Like, how do you invite students to Socrative? If that's what you mean, I can kind of quickly show you that. More than happy to kind of walk through that. How do you sign into the Socrative account? Okay, just bear with me. I'm just gonna share my screen with you. Share screen, there we are. Okay, start broadcast. So there's actually two ways in which you can do that. If you are a school that's using Showbie, there's a sign in from the Showbie side because Socrative integrates. But if you are just using Socrative on its own through the website, for example, then really what you would do is, if you're completely new, just go to Socrative.com. Okay, and when you are here, you can actually go into login, and you can go to sign up now, and you can create a completely new account. However, this would be a free account, and free account has limitations in that you only have one room, so therefore you can't do lots of quizzes at the same time. Okay, so just be aware of that, and that's how you would sign up. As part of ClassKit, if you end up getting Socrative part of ClassKit, you will get a license key. And when you get a license key, then it's pretty simple. Right at the top, if I just go into profile, you will have your account, and you'll be able to put in a license key. Now, so this license key is just for me. So if anybody else used it, it's not going to work. But if you had like 20 teachers, you would get a license key that is that works 20 times or for 20 people. So you would put that in, and then you're on. And also at Showbie, because there's an integration thing happening. If I wanted to launch a quiz here, if I first and foremost, if I just go into my account at the top, it says my Socrative connection. And at the moment, it's telling me my Socrative connection is strong. That means I'm signed in. But what you would have to do for the first time, and as a one-off, you would need to put your username and password in, the Socrative username and password, not Showbie. They two can be very different. And once you've done that, then you're good to go. Then this means that I can do some pretty nice things here. I can just go here straight, and if I just go to shared items, and I can tap plus, and I can now choose quiz, and I can launch a quiz from here as well. Yeah, so that can be quite useful. And of course, from a student perspective, they will get feedback, they will get Socrative sheets and reports and so on as well, and so on. So that can be time saving. Okay, let's have a look. Any more questions?
Doesn't seem that there's any more questions, Abdul, to be asked.
Okay, fantastic.
Great. Well, that kind of takes us to the end of this webinar. Like I said, I will be sending a recording of this to you, so there's no reason to request anything. It will automatically be sent out. Abdul, is there anything else you wanted to add before we finish?
No, that's thank you very much for joining and kind of listening to me. If there's anything else that we can do to help, support, train, absolutely feel free to get in touch with us. If you want to know more about ClassKit, if you want a detailed session on Explain Everything, or Socrative and Showbie, we do have understanding webinars that are available on the Showbie website. Just go to showbie.com and you can get that from there. If you Google Showbie certified educators, if you're already Showbie users, then that's something that you might find really useful, because it's basically a self-paced study course with lots of tutorials, but actually the focus is on things like communication, assessment, efficiencies, and so on. And if you're successful at that, you become a Showbie certified educator. Sarah sends you nice badges. You get to have yourself on our website and connect and share with the whole kind of Showbie education community as well.
Details of the program will be included in the email as well that I send the recording with. So if you are interested, details of that will be emailed across along with the recording. Great. Well, thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. I hope you found it helpful. Yeah, and you will receive an email from me quite soon.